Okay, before we start work, it's a very good idea to customize Vue application to act and look in a way you like it. To do this, we'll need to go to File and open Options menu. Right here, you notice we have General Preferences, Display Options, Units, Coordinates, and Operation. Let's start from General Preferences. First, what you notice, we have options when you create and start up Vue, how it will behave. You want to create a specific scene that you can set as default or create with a blank. Save configuration and exit. Save scenes and small pictures when you render. It's very nice when you start previewing, check through all of your collections of the scenery you created. Make backup copies. I do recommend enable this. By default it's won't be, but you can enable and set how many backup copies you wanted. Also, you have an option bypass visual browser for the scene pictures and option to disable after savings. I do recommend keeping this up. It's actually very nice options that you can also specify when do you want to, how often save and how many versions you want to save it. Our preview options allowed us to have a specific preview for the function and materials when we start working with them. This is option which allowed you to preview type by default in a sphere. You can select as a cube, terrain, or any other plane as well. Type of the background colors, and object size. Don't worry if we're going a little bit fast and you maybe don't understand options of this. Overall, we'll come back and we'll probably go several times over when we go inside the function editor and specify we can kind of change and modify this. Right now it's kind of overview, so you feel sometimes familiar, and when we start to reference, it's kind of go click back and says, oh, I kind of remember where it was. And again, all these options, when we start using, you will remember and start to see how they will affect what we're doing inside the Vue. Okay. Next, we also have an option to disable automatic preview. I do recommend keep this unchecked because when you modify it, otherwise you need right click on a window to preview constantly. However, if you have a very slow machine, maybe a bit older with older video card, you want to enable this. On this case, it will reduce some overhead CPU pre-render on your machine. It's make a bit faster work. Okay, and on the render materials in preview and active editor, the same options. If you want to increase a bit on your machine productivity, it's a little bit older video card. Most of the video card currently from 275 or even lower GTX will work just fine. Okay, next we also have options for allowed internet network connections. This way, when Vue check for the updates or notifications and will updating your application, it's up to you, depend how you work in your work environment. Mine is always keep it up. If you feel uncomfortable with this, you can uncheck these options. Okay, let's look on object properties. First, select all object using material select and summary. Right here, when we'll check more in our world browser, you'll see summary of material summary. When we click on this, it will select all these objects that are using same materials. So these options will allow to do this as well. Flash view when changing object preview color. When you select a new preview color from the drop-down list of the object properties panel, the select objects will temporarily deselect and show that have taken new color. By unchecking this box, you don't want that to happen. Okay, next, when you scatter, when you're using option to scatter and duplicate it, you can use the same number of objects that you selected for the scatter dialog. When duplicated by checking, you will enable that use the same number. Next, enable automatic primitive numbering, and you notice when you create like sphere, it will number sphere 1, sphere 2, sphere 3, or otherwise it will just give it same name. I do recommend have this enabled. In this case, it's make it a little bit easy to identify objects. You always can rename them by double click on a name. Display real size object and world units. This is useful when you work with the numbers, and you'll notice when we'll have it in numeric tab right here with object when we start working. It's what we want to use for this. Most of these options, when you look for the default, they're actually set from experience by using, and I do recommend keep them as a default unless you know what kind of options you want specifically from this. And next we will have it preserve save a natural element at created, same as checked. Offset duplicate objects, so when we create it, it's one placed one inside another one. It's just slightly shift them. Make easier to select. By default is unchecked. However, this one, when you start first time using Vue, I do recommend check this in till you become familiar with Vue and understand how to easy to find and select. Many times when it's happened, you maybe create couple object spheres and one will be inside another one, and you won't notice that the two together if you don't pay attention to your layer or maybe on different layers. And after you modify material on one, you don't see modification because maybe other sphere inside overlaid with this. So I do recommend for the beginning, please check this option in. Center view objects when you're loading. Yes, it's you want to enable, so it's meaning when your windows, its object will create in the center of the active window. Drop target object with mouse location, you want this enable. Drop import object onto the ground. It's up to how you like it. Normally I keep it unchecked. It's meaning when I import something, it will create where is mouse located instead on the ground. Sometimes when I create a mountain and I want placed object on the top, this way is kind of nice important place to write, easy to place. Instead it doesn't bury somewhere down below. Assign last use material to new object. Again, this is options, it's up to you. It's mean when you create a new object and you assign material, you creating something new, it will take same material that you create before will assign to this object. It is more related to workflow that you prefer. By default is unchecked. You also can configure poser import if you have a poser application. This way you just click and specify what library SDK you want to use it. Mostly I use the latest one. As well you have a location for your poser application. Okay, next we have it render options. We have it render small pictures object before savings. I do recommend this. It's help you identify when you look through your library. Reset render settings when create new scene. Same. However, if you pre-creating, for example, render for publications or others that you want to keep it same rendering before for new, you want to uncheck this property. You maybe want to come back and work with this, uncheck this reset, depend on the project you're working with or depend on the style of your workflow. Generate and resume render info. This is help you. For example, if I create big picture, I start rendering on my main machine and I need to do something, I can stop the render, save its scenery and save resume render info, so I can come back after and continue rendering from the point I break. It's helpful if you're going this way. If you're using maybe a render farm or render cows, which does not utilize this option, you can uncheck it. Abort render, click on render areas. This is help to avoid accidentally maybe press escape or click somewhere in Vue application and stop your rendering. So keep this checked as well. Flash LMS data when render completed. It's up to depend on what computer you have it. Normally it's unchecked, but if you have a problem with the limited memory resources, you uncheck this. Limited displacement mapping memory usage. Again, most computers, if you have it more than 8 GB, I say just don't worry about this. If you have it below, then you probably want limited, so you will have a little bit more control and your computer, when you work with Vue, does not start spawning on your hard drive and make much slower work. Render stacking options. Right here you'll notice when you render, it's pop up and start showing previews kind of images what you rendered before. Right here you can kind of control it, how much memory you want to use it, where do you want to stack those folders, and options for your stacking. So by default just keep it as it is already preset unless you need modify in, for example, increase size for this. Okay, we have it also undo redo options. We can have it maximum number of undo by time or redo, so it's keeping your steps inside the memories, and also keep it history on the percentage. One thing what I do recommend, if you start working with Vue and you kind of exploring, increase amount of this. It will take a little bit more memory, but the best parts of this, if you do something wrong, you can undo and go back in a step and kind of save you from doing over again. Again, you can, if you're using snapshots often or other things, you maybe don't need this, because that way you can create snapshots and jump back through your snapshots. But if you don't, and just start beginning, just increase this. Okay, next you also have flash history. These options are available on a file, and on the bottom you'll see flash memory, so you can kind of flash memory that we used, also flash history of the in a system. When you're loading plants, when you're loading materials inside the Vue, Vue will pre-cache the materials, textures, and even sometimes you delete objects, but those textures still caching inside the Vue. It does helpful. For example, if I create ecosystem and I loaded some trees on this one, and I'm trying to create another terrain and loaded another one, it will perform much faster with this caching. However, if you don't use it, it's take memory. Again, right here you can control it as well inside the file, and you'll see right here memory flash. Okay, next we have an ecosystem option, populating. When you reach this limit, what is happening, the Vue start displaying as a blocks, square instead. So you can increase or decrease amount of the polygons and amount of the populations warning. So it's come up menu and says, hey, you reach your population, maybe using too much. It depends amount of memory you're using on your computers. I have a 12 GB on this machine, so I probably safely can increase this warning higher. If you have it about 4 GB, I will recommend to leave it as default. If you have it 8 GB or more, you can at least very safely double this, or just even make 10 times more. It will be quite a bit safe to work with this threshold. Okay, next we have an interactive field change, interactive slider change if you want it, enable synchronization. Those again by default just leave this as the set. This is more fun part. Right here we can load interface preset, change the interface color, restore it, and some additional gamma option. What does mean loaded interface preset? When we click, you notice right here from drop down we have a different type of application. So let's select Maya 2011. You click OK, and you notice right here we change to the interface look like Maya 2011, so you can start using. As well, some of your shortcuts change to this, so you can modify to fill in exactly application that you're working with. So right here, for example, Vue 11 application, and I will keep it to this interface for duration of tutorials, so we can kind of see how it's work with application. But right here you can change. Also, you can click on interface colors and modify colors manually if you want to adjust in a way you like it. Anytime when you do something, you can always reset to default, and you can also restore the disabled messages, so you can always roll back all your changes, go back. The last one in the general preference tab, it's a gamma options. Right here we open, and you notice this is linear workflow, what people call. It's meaning to synchronize of the color, lighting, and other properties between different applications. It was developed the system how the lighting will work with the gamma corrections. Currently, I disable on this machine. You can enable and set by default. Default is, if I'm right, it's 2.1. This is standard, but Vue keep it 1.8 by default color correction. You can modify in a way you like it, and you can also specify if you want affect the color emitters, materials, function, scalar, if you want to have it as well. Right here we have it gamma and output gamma. This is kind of important, depend with what import texture you're working. If you're working with texture that's coming with already pre-corrected, you maybe want to change it or readjust these values as well. Okay, for the beginning. Okay, so here's an overview of one tab. In our next one, we'll look on other ones.